how about you kick us off? I'm going to keep monitoring for additional folks to join, and the pallet's there. So I guess try to use it in our different virtual space, and we'll see how this goes.
Sounds good.
And Nicole, I'm just going to ask real quick for folks to turn their cameras on unless you are driving, but we really hope folks are in a place where they can participate safely.
Sounds good. And some people are messaging me about what Zoom link to be on, so I'm just gonna respond to them really fast so they know where to go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
there are residents here, which I know Steph said, and I forgot. So we do have residents today. So residents, if you might want to unmute, tell us who you are, and then we will go around and say who we are and talk a little bit about what we're doing today. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nick. I'm a first-year pediatrics resident.
Hey there, I'm Jeff. I'm one of the third-year pediatrics residents. Nice to meet you.
And I'm Megan. I'm one of the other third-year categorical peds residents. Nice to meet you guys.
You know what I might ask folks to do? I think it'd be super helpful if in addition to your name, you put your discipline, since we're all on here virtually, and for the residents to keep track of who's talking about what. I think that would be super helpful. Do you guys know how to change your names on Zoom? And I think, Marta, to make it just easy, I think if we just call folks out and ask them to introduce themselves and their discipline.
Yes. So Sally and I will start. So
Yeah.
I'm Marta, and I'm not changing my name because I don't own this account. And I'm probably, I think I'm recording. I think it's being recorded. So I'm the social work faculty for LEND. And today, just a little overview. This is our interdisciplinary training team, and this is our team's care conference. So the kid that we've been seeing for this semester, he's been through all of his, this is Mila. So she's been through all of her evaluations. And next week is her information sharing session. So this is our meeting to kind of talk about, review the evaluations, recommendations, diagnosis, and how we're going to share and impart information to family on next steps. So a little background about what we're doing today. So Sally.
Sure. I'm Sally LaCroix, and I'm a physical therapist. I'm the core faculty member in PT for LEND, and with Marta and Lindsay co-facilitate this class. And I'm going to pass the baton to Dr. Williams-Aria.
Hi, I'm Pam Williams-Aria. I am a developmental behavioral pediatrician, and I'm the LEND pediatric faculty member. I will pass it to, who do I see on my screen? Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I am a speech language pathologist and the SLP faculty member for LEND.
Who are you going to pass it to, Leslie?
Oh, I'm so excited. I like to make things interesting. Let's see, Carrie.
Hi, everyone. My name's Carrie Atzinger. I'm the genetic counseling faculty, and I'll pass it to Haley.
Hello, my name is Haley Grimes. I'm the genetic counseling LEND trainee. I will pass it on to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm the current physical therapist that's involved in LEND and also the pediatric PT resident at Children's. And I will pass it to Raz.
Hi, I'm Raz. I'm an audiology extern at Cincinnati Children's, and I am the audiology trainee for LEND, and I'll pass it to Virginia.
Virginia, your audio is not working. I think you've been having issues because you can leave and come back. Virginia's our audiology clinical supervisor, though. And then I'll read out Janetta, I know is in the midst of some child pickups. So Janetta's our family trainee, and Steph had to step away. If anyone went to pass to Steph, Steph's our training director and psychologist and training director, and she had to step away to take a call. So Steph is also not available at this moment. So I will pass to Kaylee.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Coletta, and I am the speech and language trainee. I will pass it to Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm one of the psych trainees, and I will pass it to Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm also one of the psych trainees, and I will pass it to Brad.
Hey, I'm Brad. This is not technically my ITT team, but I'm joining in regardless. I'm one of the developmental behavioral pediatrics fellows. Residents, you guys are more than welcome to PM me any questions or anything that you might have about anything that's going on today. And I will try and see if I can find someone who's left that I can pass it to. Who have we not gotten to?
Courtney?
I'll pass it to Courtney. Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm the PT mentor for Anna. And I'll pass to Elizabeth. I think you haven't gone yet.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Trenkamp. I'm the Family Discipline Coordinator and Family Navigator in the division. I believe Victoria hasn't chimed in yet.
Can you guys see me? I can't see myself.
Now we
Okay.
can.
My name is Victoria. I am a social work trainee with the LEND program.
All right, Nicole, we're off.
Awesome. I know at one point we had a presentation for today. Is that still on us? Do you want to start to give us what went on with your eval?
Sure. I can just share my screen. I feel like that would be easier.
I did put the link to the Padlet as well if anybody wants to make questions, comments, or thoughts on there while Anna is presenting.
Oh, I definitely did not. Can you flip the screen so you definitely? Okay, so now you guys are just seeing the slideshow, right? Okay, perfect. Okay, so like we already introduced ourselves, I am Anna. I'm the physical therapist with LEND, and this is just kind of summing up my evaluation with Miss Mila, along with the recommendations that we had for her. So our general agenda is that we're going to talk about the evaluation process and methods. We're going to talk about our evaluation findings, and then our overall recommendations for Miss Mila. In a PT evaluation, typically we have kind of four main buckets that we go into. We talk about the subjective information. So we talk about whether or not parents or the patient may have any gross motor concerns, what their general developmental history was, and their general home environment. Then we usually flow into more of the objective information. So strength, range of motion, balance, coordination, and just general gross motor skills. And then in this unique situation, since it was an evaluation for DDBP, we also did a standardized assessment. So we did the Peabody Developmental Motor Scale second edition based on Mila's age. And then lastly, we move into the discussions and recommendations and whether or not there are any other appropriate referrals that need to be made and therapy recommendations going forward. So just a little bit about the evaluation, behavior, and environment with Miss Mila. Overall, she was playing. She was intermittently cooperative with the clinicians that were present in session. She did have a full house for her evaluation. So there was Ruthie, myself, Courtney. We also had Sally come observe, and then Mom was present. She did have kind of just an overall decreased interest and tolerance to therapist-directed activities, so she required frequent redirection throughout the evaluation. She inconsistently followed 1 to 2 step directions. She did require occasional demonstration, or she did demonstrate anger and displeasure with non-preferred activities. And she also had a couple moments of fear and anxiety with certain activities. So when she was having her angry moments, her big things that she did is she did voice that she was, not happy. She said no, she didn't want to do something. She did also try to hide underneath the sink that was in the room. She did eventually kind of come out. We all kind of sat with her on the floor and kind of talked through, why we were upset, what we could do to kind of make it easier for her going forward. And then when we got into the fear and anxiety, it was more so when I had her laying on her belly to take some measurements at her lower extremity, so in her legs. She was really hesitant and kind of anxious about what was going on or what was going to be happening and if the measuring tool was going to hurt her. We let her kind of play around with the measuring tools, explain that it's not going to do anything to hurt her per se, but it's just taking a measurement. She tried to measure my foot. And then we also moved into kind of some of that preferred distraction with the Cocomelon video. And overall, she ended up doing fine with that. For subjective information, Mom didn't have any real concerns regarding Mila's gross motor skills. She did note that Mila typically does have frequent trips and falls, but she does believe that they're more likely to just not necessarily being aware of her surroundings or obstacles. And a key example would be that right before the evaluation, like the day before, she fell at the park and there was visible bruising around her left eye. And Mom said that she was walking around and not paying attention, and she kind of walked right into another child at the park, and it led her to kind of fall and then bump her head/eye. As far as her home environment, education, and play leisure activities, Mom provided us the information that they do currently live in a 2-story apartment. They don't have any steps to enter, but Mila's bedroom and bathroom are on the 2nd floor. Mila's current education environment is that she's home with Mom. Mom has talked to other providers as well about exploring preschool options. And so when she initially brought it up during our evaluation, she was talking about how she initially did want to explore preschool options, but now she's hesitant because she's not sure if they're going to end up moving. And it wouldn't necessarily just be moving, apartments. She states that it would likely be a move from Ohio to Kentucky, which then would change Mila's preschool environment. And she was just hesitant about having Mila start in an environment and then moving her partway through after she was already comfortable and making friends. And things that Mila did enjoy, she likes noisy toys, coloring, and Cocomelon. As far as the beginning of the objective information, so for functional mobility, Mila was able to kind of do all the transfers we would expect for her age well and safely. For gait, we're going to get into a little bit more specifically here shortly. We'll talk about our observational gait scale and just what we observed overall as she was walking and running throughout the evaluation. When we get to stair climbing, she did have increased difficulty with descending the stairs, and she did kind of have decreased safety awareness overall when she was doing them. So when she was going up the stairs, she used that kind of alternating foot over foot, and she had one hand on the railing. When she was coming down, she had like a step 2 pattern. So she would have 2 feet on one stair as she came down. And again, like with her decreased safety awareness, we did definitely feel like she required supervision when going down the stairs, just because of that, I guess like poor or impaired muscle control with coming down the stairs and not necessarily being aware of her environment. I think it's also important to note that at 3 years of age, what we would expect is that she would go up and down the stairs independently with or without a railing and using that like alternating foot over foot pattern. As far as balance, sitting and standing, it was within functional limits. We did note that she did have some difficulty with dynamic standing balance tasks. So when she was asked to go into tiptoe stance, she couldn't really maintain being on tiptoes for more than 1 to 2 seconds. When we had her try and demonstrate single leg stance, we did notice a lot of like postural sway. She again was only kind of maintaining that for 1 to 2 seconds. She also had a tendency to grab the leg that she was lifting to do the single leg stance, almost to kind of hold it up and try and keep it there. When we asked her to kind of walk on a line, she didn't have the ability to stay on the line while she was walking back and forth. It was unclear if it was truly a balance deficit versus just an attention. She wasn't necessarily paying attention to where the line and her feet were at the time. When we get into coordination, we had Mila gallop, and she was able to gallop with both legs leading, so both with the right and the left. She did have more of an inconsistent pattern when she was leading with her left leg, so it was a little bit more challenging for her to lead that way. And when we get into jumping, she was able to demo the ability to jump up, forward, and down off of some of the furniture that was in the room. And so when she was jumping up, she was able to jump and get about like 2 to 3 inches off the ground. And she was able to kind of have that double leg takeoff and landing. And when she was jumping forward, she was able to jump forward and land 19 inches in front of her. But she was unable to demo hopping on either leg when she was asked. And in general, her ball skills were what we expected for 3. So this is the observational gait scale. For reference, a perfect score is a 22, and Mila did score 21. Overall, her gait mechanics looked pretty good. What this observational gait scale doesn't take into account is her foot posture per se, more so if we're talking about in-toeing versus out-toeing. As Mila is walking and running, she does demo more of a tendency to in-toe, so her toes are kind of pointing inward, which could also contribute to some trips and falls, which we did talk to mom about. And we also then kind of influenced then the rest of our objective information on what kind of measurements for range of motion or other palpation and observation things do we need to look at to kind of tease out whether or not we should be concerned that the in-toeing may be coming from more of a bony standpoint versus like a muscular or habitual standpoint. For her range of motion, overall, it looked pretty good. It was within functional limits, what we would expect. We did take a thigh foot angle measurement, more so visually. It was, again, a little bit more difficult to kind of use those measuring tools with her because they did kind of cause her to be a little bit more hesitant and anxious about what was going on. But what we did know is that thigh foot angle measurement was about -10 degrees bilaterally, which indicates more of an internal rotation posture. And this measure is taken by lining up kind of in between like the back of her thigh to then having her leg bent. And then it goes kind of bisects where her foot is. If I had a better setup, I would try to show you guys a little bit better. But they're on their bellies, they bend their knees up so they're the bottom of their foot is pointing up towards the ceiling. And we take our big measuring tool and we measure it from coming to like where the hip bones are, like down the thigh, and then to where in between her second and third toe. And that kind of gives us a good idea of, you know, where is she resting in her hip placement. So is she more internally or externally rotated? And when we also did just kind of a screen of internal and external rotation at the hip, we did note that she had more internal rotation motion at the hip on both sides compared to external rotation. And an important thing to note too when we're thinking about whether or not she has more internal or external rotation is then how does it influence her sitting posture? And so in this stance, since she had more of an internal rotation postural preference and she had more motion that way, it could influence her preference to sit in W sitting. And she did quite frequently throughout the evaluation. And so those are some other things that we take into account when we're looking at range of motion. Overall with strength, we noticed that she does have some bilateral hip weakness that we observed in more functional skills. So when we think about functional skills that we can see this in, it could be walking, going up and down the stairs, and single leg balance. And what we had a tendency to notice was some muscles that we have around our hips have the ability to keep our hips level while we're in those single leg stance moments. So if they are weak or damaged in any capacity, what we can see is that when we have those single leg moments, instead of our hips being held equally, we can see the opposite hip or like the stable hip almost drop because it's not able to hold those hips even because it's not strong enough, or again, it might have some sort of other injury or impairment. So we did notice that with Mila's gait, likely indicating that she does have some strength deficits in those hip muscles. Overall, though, her muscle tone was within normal limits. We didn't notice any increase or decreased muscle tone in Mila's lower extremities. Her posture overall was great. She did have that preference for W sitting throughout the evaluation. And what we did notice is that her feet did almost rotate opposite of what we would expect in W sitting. And so that was just an interesting note and just kind of one thing that we'll continue to monitor too as she goes through PT, or whether or not that's something that needs to be addressed aside from just kind of eliminating W sitting in general. And for her standing posture, she does have that in-toeing that's observable. She did also, without her shoes on, demonstrate a mild hallux varus bilaterally, which is really just fancy wording for her big toe had a tendency to kind of drift inward, more so than what we'd expect. So it wasn't like all of her toes kind of coming in. She more pronouncedly kind of had that big toe pointing inward compared to her other toes. And if we move into the standardized assessment, so again, we did the Peabody Developmental Motor Skills, and this is an assessment that we use to measure early motor abilities, and we typically use it to then estimate the motor competence in these kiddos relative to their same age peers, and it allows us to observe disparities in fine and gross motor abilities. The results are obviously beneficial for us to know, so that way it can influence our interventions in our sessions. It can also be used to then evaluate progress. So you could do this assessment at the beginning and the end to kind of see where they are and what progress that they've made after interventions. And it does assess 5 main areas. So it goes into reflexes, stationary, which is more so of like the balance skills and some strength things. And then locomotion, which is more of that running and walking and stairs. And then object manipulation, which is more ball skills, so kicking, catching, throwing. And then there's grasping and visual motor integration. And so as a physical therapist, the 3 areas that I would focus on based on Mila's age are stationary, locomotion, and object manipulation. If Mila were younger, we would look at reflexes, but typically that's just more so in the infant assessment. And then grasping and visual motor integration is typically what the OTs will assess. And then these are Mila's overall results from the Peabody. And what we'll notice is that she did fairly well. Her overall gross motor score does put her more than 1 standard deviation below the mean, but it's very slight. And if we look at just her individual scores for locomotion, so again, that like more movement-based coordination skills, she did score within what we would expect. So within that 1 deviation from the mean, and same with same with object manipulation. So she did fairly well and was more so with what we would within what we would expect. So within that 1 standard deviation from the mean. Stationary is where we saw some of more impairments or some more challenges with Mila. And so that is a score that fell more than 1 standard deviation below the mean. But I also think it's important to take into consideration just the overall environment and Mila's attention to the assessment as well. So she definitely required frequent redirection, incentives, and demonstration for these activities. And she was occasionally kind of given more than 3 trials if she did not necessarily exert like a full effort in her initial trials, which definitely can impact the standardization or accuracy of her scoring. And for just a better visual, so I provided just a bell curve visual for her scores for her Peabody assessment. So the green line is what her overall gross motor skills are. So she falls just below that for that 1 standard deviation below the mean. And then we can see next to that on the left would be her purple star, which is more significantly below the 1 standard deviation below the mean. And then I included her locomotion and object manipulation Z-scores as well, which were within those normal limits. So within that 1 standard deviation within the mean. And so overall, it did kind of indicate that her gross motor scores are below what we would anticipate for her age. But again, important to take into account what the assessment may have looked like in the environment in general. So the redirection and the incentives and the demonstration. And then at the end of the assessment, we did kind of go over the results with Mom and did provide her a visual of the bell curve and where Mila was. And then also just some ideas of things that we could be working on too to kind of improve some of her gross motor skills and maybe get her more so within what we would expect. So within that 1 standard deviation from the mean. And that kind of leads us then into what our physical therapy recommendations were for Miss Mila. So we had a discussion with mom, and I think it's also important to note that after our discussion with mom too, just kind of sensing her overall experience as ITT and like that she's going to have a lot of recommendations, we did express to mom that physical therapy at this point doesn't have to be a priority for Mila. She's moving around great and getting around her environments as she needs. She's fairly safe, and she's got a lot of great skills that can be easily built upon at home as well with the home exercise program. But what we could address coming into physical therapy would be to address some of those balance and strength impairments that we saw throughout the evaluation and assessments, and also kind of work on some of those age appropriate gross motor skills. So the jumping and hopping, and then the stair navigation, and then just some of that gait training for her in-toeing tendencies, to kind of see if we can work towards maybe neutralizing her gait pattern a little bit more, especially if we think that it may be contributing to some of her trips and falls. We did send mom home with a home exercise program. And so the first couple notes that we gave her were that we were suggesting that she could stand up to put on socks and shoes, or pop bubbles with her toes, because that kind of gives her the opportunity to have some of those dynamic single leg moments that seem to be more of a challenge for her at this time. We also said that we definitely want to try to avoid W sitting, so trying to facilitate more appropriate sitting positions for Mila as she was playing. So whether that be we kind of move her legs more so underneath her so she's heel sitting, or we kind of move her into like that side sitting or cheerleading sit, or kind of then facilitating maybe more of a crisscross applesauce, anything to kind of lessen the stress that W sitting puts on a kiddo's hips and knee joints. We also recommended just doing some single leg balance activities. And if she required kind of holding on to a hand or a counter at first, what that would look like progression wise, as she gets more comfortable, then we kind of progress to, okay, if she's doing like one hand holding or a whole hand on a counter, maybe then we progress to just having one finger on the counter or against a wall, and then to having no hands. And then we also, for jumping, kind of suggested doing jumping over small stuffed animals or toys, just to kind of help her with that like tuck jump, or the ability to kind of clear the ground with adequate space. And then also doing some balance on her tiptoes, as that was something that she was challenged by as well, just kind of being able to maintain that position and then maintain it both while standing still and while walking. She had a tendency to want to do more of the stepping while she was in tiptoes, instead of being able to just maintain it. Like if you were needing to go on tiptoes to reach up for something in a cabinet, where we would need some of that more like static ability to hold a tiptoe stance. But overall, mom was definitely on board with the plan for physical therapy. She understood that while Mila may have a lot of recommendations coming down the line, this was not something that she needed to prioritize and kind of facilitate right at this moment. And we kind of expressed that there were multiple options or locations too that they could get physical therapy. They didn't necessarily have to come all the way down to Clifton if one of our satellite campuses is going to be easier for them. And that in general, we think that Mila is doing great, and that she could just work in PT for some of those fine tuning things. So we just recommended, again, those 8 visits to kind of work on those gross motor skills and balance and strength stuff that hopefully could be carried over at home too, as Mila graduates from PT in the future. And I think that's all we have for you guys. Does anybody have any questions about Mila's PT assessment? All right, I can
It
probably
looks
then.
like Pam might have a question.
Oh, yes.
I have a comment and a question. Really nice
Okay.
job on your presentation. Really like some of the graphics and your explanation of the hips and the weakness, which is going to be related to my question. But the comment is first, like with the history of kid that's kind of tripping and falling, and for lack of a better word, parents may describe as clumsy. I think it's also important to always think about vision in those kids that are kind of not, when you hear like they're not paying attention to where they're going and things like that. But in her case, she's had, I'm just talking about for the broader group. In her case, she had a full ophthalmology evaluation because she has that dermal lipoma on one of her eyes. And so that we know that her vision is normal. But it made me think about that when you were talking about that. The second thing is the question I had on it is around the weakness. in a kid that's otherwise healthy physically, to what do you attribute like the weakness? Is it kind of like not being exposed to enough activities or a variety of activities, or is it have anything to do with the W sitting, or in an otherwise healthy like child physically, like what do you think kind of leads to kind of weakness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Courtney and Sally, feel free to jump in too if you have any comments. But in general, what I feel like we can see is that it could be more so just like a lack of exposure or habits to certain positions. So she doesn't necessarily challenge those muscles often. And we see that those muscles are typically challenged in a lot of things like single leg stance or some of those higher level growth motor activities, which she did have a tendency to be more difficult for her. When it comes to W sitting, what we think about is a lot of times they lack some of that like strength or support. So then they kind of find themselves getting closer to the ground to find the support. So we see it in a lot of kids who may have lower muscle tone or just like some general weakness. And so by facilitating more appropriate sitting positions and kind of encouraging her to go forth and participate in some of those more dynamic strengthening and balance activities, we would hope to see that weakness would improve. So that way we wouldn't see necessarily the unlevel hips with certain functional mobility activities that we're seeing right now. But a lot of times it can just be attributed to preferences and like lack of exposure to certain activities that would help build or facilitate those muscles. And in kiddos this young, a lot of it is more so like directed play and trying to incorporate that without being like, hey, we're going to do, hip kicks 3 times 10 to a certain side to kind of work on some of those hip abduction muscles or whatever the muscle may be at that point. And so I think that's an important part too of our job, is then kind of teaching parents then going forward, what can we do at home to help with some of that strengthening and positioning, because it's easier for them to work it into things that Mila already enjoys or participates in. So that way it's not an extra thing on their plate and it's something that can easily be worked into routine wise. But I don't know if Sally and Courtney have anything else that they wanted to add to that as well.
Courtney, did you want to add anything?
I apologize. Someone called me right in the middle of that, but I did hear your answer. It sounded like the question was what can contribute to kids W sitting?
And like just that hip weakness.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, Anna.
So if I heard you right, the W sitting is a symptom of weakness, not the cause, or is it just intertwined?
I would say it's usually often intertwined, that like if that's the seating preference that they kind of like identify early on, it can then attribute to then future weakness as they develop if they're constantly just in that position that's more so just getting support from the floor and not necessarily their own like trunk and hip strength. But again, if they're already weak in those positions, then it's easier to kind of fall into those positions where you're seeking out support elsewhere too.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if you add, oh, sorry.
That's okay. I would just add that lots of kids W sit and they all might have slightly different reasons for doing it, but it's hard to tease out what came first. I mean, that's just really hard to do. But all babies are born with a little bit more femoral antetorsion, so that internal torsion of the femur. And if you have weakness or stability issues, that W sit is a much wider base of support. But it leads to weakness because you don't really have to use your lower core. You can't rotate to transition in and out of crawling. So it's this catch-22, right? The other thing with her, when you mentioned about tripping and falling, something that I noticed is that she had a really hard time attending to anything for a period of time. And so attention and impulsivity are sometimes these behavioral traits that also relate to, we're not standing on one foot and practicing that skill to do something intentional. She's flying and crashing into the next thing. And so I don't know what part of that is more related to her like developmental diagnosis, how much of that is related to like sensory concerns, but there's a lot of pieces for her in her case to think about.
she established with the new primary care yesterday. And clearly they discussed both of these concerns because that person put in a new referral for PT, which hasn't even like trickled all the way through our system yet, and a new referral for ophthalmology. But this is a brand new provider to the family. But just yesterday, these were the topics of conversation with primary care.
Okay, thanks, Anna. That was a great presentation. So the three big things we have to talk about in our remaining time today are kind of any updates from last time, which I know social work has some. What those most important recs are, as Anna kind of alluded to. In psychology, we're trying to make like a one-page summary with kind of diagnoses, as well as like what are these big things that we think are most important for a family to think about right now. And then lastly, who do we want to be in that room next Tuesday, which I know I've talked to some of you about that already. But if it's okay, social work, would you mind starting with kind of updates you have about what's going on with family and what their plan is for next Tuesday?
Hello. So I did talk to mom after our last conversation, and the topic was like if she would be able to come in and how would that look if it was virtual. I did talk to her. She said she would be able to make it. It is unclear who's coming as well with her. So I know I told her like the kids are more than welcome and Tim is more than welcome to come. And I also let her know, like, just to let us know ahead of time if the kids are coming so that we can, have some providers there that are able to talk with and play with the kids while the information session is going on.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone feel like they're gonna be here or be available to like be on standby in case kids do come next Tuesday? It's at 9 a.m. next Tuesday in MOB on the 3rd floor. And you don't have to respond right now if you're not sure, but maybe send social work an email or Marta an email if that sounds good, if you can be there. Just so they have someone to sit with. Anything else like family changes? I know Marta, you mentioned, thank you, Erica. They got connected to healthcare. Any other changes we should know about?
They do have Ohio Medicaid now. They have Ohio Medicaid managed care plan. And Victoria, I think mom talked to you about why they might be moving to Kentucky, and if they move to Kentucky, where in a timeline, sort of.
Right. So they would be moving to Kentucky because dad works in Kentucky. I mean, not dad. Tim works in Kentucky. Which is Mila's stepdad, kinda, because it's mom's fiance. But he works in Kentucky at DHL, so that's kind of why it's hard for her to commute here. Because he gets off really late and then he has to drive an hour up there just to give her the car, just so she can drive down here. So that's the reason that they were looking to move. It's still unsure, but that was the reason. Also, like financial concerns as well because of gas and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that update. I think we can move into like what recommendations we think are most important. Maria, are you a note taker? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, I'm taking notes.
Okay, do you mind sharing your screen so that we can look at it as we kind of talk through all of our things together?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just let me know where you want me to be.
It's a great comment. I'm not sure where I want you to be. I don't know if we want to go through kind of like discipline by discipline and have people say what like that discipline thinks is the most important recommendation. And it might be like, hey, kind of like Anna said, like PT is important, but it doesn't have to be the thing that happens right now. Like that's also okay. But if someone has a different idea for how to go through this, I'm open to that too. Just trying to be mindful of the virtual format that we're kind of having fun with today. Okay, no one else is shouting at me that that's a bad idea. So I think we can try it. I will go first. I'll go for psychology. So I think the big three that we highlighted as important were getting her connected to school. We recommended Head Start given families' financial concerns. Our second one was getting her behavior therapy, and so that mom can get some new strategies for it to do at home. And then we also recommended occupational therapy to get her connected or get her stronger with some of those activities of daily living. So those were the big three that we put in our report. I'm just gonna call on a random discipline. Can I call on social work for what your guys' biggest recommendations were?
So my biggest recommendation for Mila was, like you said, Head Start, getting her into preschool and then getting her into any type of like community or recreational activities that she can do at like a YMCA or something, just to be with other kids in a structured environment of some sort, because I feel like that's what she needs. And then also just mom talking to women helping women, and then also mom reading through those handouts that we gave her for like resources on safe touch and things like that, and just letting us know if any kind of updates on those things as well, which is not really a recommendation but just something that I probably need to talk to mom about. So that's really it that I think, unless Marta had anything else to add, but that's it for me.
Nope, nothing else to add. Unless other things come up as we talk about other resources that we need to help mom connect to.
Sounds good. And at the bottom of that one pager, we will put like, here are the people you can contact if you have questions. So we'll make sure to put your guys' email on there. Okay, speech. Did you guys have any big recommendations?
We didn't have any speech and language specific recommendations, but I would have to agree, Nicole, with basically echoing what you said. I would say that I personally would like to see her in OT in school, and then also some behavioral therapy I think could be really beneficial for her.
Great. Audiology. Any recommendations?
Nope, we were able to get that full eval, so really only follow up if mom has any concerns or if we have recurrent ear infections or anything else that would maybe flag as a risk factor.
Awesome. Thank you. Genetic counseling, any recommendations?
Nope, Mila doesn't need genetic testing for anything that we're seeing.
Sounds good. Anna, anything outside of what you shared in your presentation about physical therapy when it works for the family?
Nope, that's about it.
Have I missed Brad from the medical side? Any recommendations that we missed?
I haven't really been present at the prior meetings, so I'm not sure what's already been discussed. I think I would generally support psychology's recommendations based on their evaluation.
That's good, thank you. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. So what I'm kind of hearing across is that there's kind of agreement that school is important. Some sort of occupational therapy and behavior management is important, but also making sure mom's feeling supported and mom's having access to these resources that she really needs, and that she knows kind of who she can talk to and what to read to kind of help her feel kind of more safe and secure at home. Does that sound like a good summary of what we all just talked about? Okay, thank you for the people who nodded and gave a thumbs up. I appreciate you all. All right, so I will plan to, Lindsay and I will write up kind of a one-page summary just for you guys to know, and I can send it out if people want to look at it. It'll probably on the very top have her two big diagnoses she got from psychology, which is ADHD and adjustment disorder. Are there any, I guess, any other diagnoses that people would like me to put on this one pager that she got from any other evaluation that we think would be really good to make sure mom has highlighted for her again? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. So I will put those two on there and kind of explain briefly like what those mean again. And then I will kind of put those, I think 4 things we talked about as a group in the middle. And then I will end with who she can contact. So that will be social work again. That'll be reaching out to psychology as well if they have questions about the psych report. Any other like phone numbers or resources that we want to make sure mom has like really readily accessible that isn't going to be kind of buried in the materials we're giving her.
I have a quick question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So since she is receiving an ADHD diagnosis, what, if any, discussion has been had with mom about the potential for like medication treatment?
Great question. I will say psychology hasn't said that yet because we haven't met with her to tell her that she's getting an ADHD diagnosis. Typically, what we do is mention that as a possibility and kind of gauge the family's interest in it. I am not remembering if she's mentioned medication to other disciplines or if anyone has a read on her opinion on medication. Since Mila is kind of young, behavior treatment can still be pretty beneficial for her. And if that's not working, then medication might be something else we think about. But did mom happen to mention anything about medication to anyone else? No, okay, I'm seeing head shakes, but great question.
I think that leads, but Brad, I think that leads to the next discussion of couple pieces. Going back to the initial referral, mom believes this child may have autism. The primary care, who's not the current primary care, the referral doesn't make it sound like the primary care thought so, because primary care included. She makes eye contact, plays pretend, and is otherwise very interactive in the referral notes. So mom has concern that she has autism. And is this a kid that can continue to be followed in DWP, or are we also telling mom we're not the right place for you?
So since she is neither receiving global developmental delay or autism, I don't believe that she can be followed in DDBP. I will say when psychology met with mom, she was like, I no longer have a ton of concerns for autism and I'm more thinking ADHD. So I think mom won't be shocked by this, but it definitely might feel different once she officially gets those results. But I don't believe we can see her in DDBP given she doesn't have either of those diagnoses. So it probably will be reinforcing that we're connecting her elsewhere. We've given her the contact for Center for ADHD and some other places around children's. But great point. Thank you.
If they're moving to Kentucky, that they won't be able to do the Center for ADHD, correct?
I think that is correct. Do we have I know it's really up in the air how certain it seems that moving Kentucky is going to be what happens.
It also, Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't it be until this lease is up? And I believe this lease is until at least October.
Okay, so maybe they could do it before then. We should encourage them before they move to take advantage of the fact that they can be connected to some things at Children's, right?
Steph, yes, Young Child Institute does have immediate openings in Hamilton County, and they live in like northern Butler County, and getting here has been an issue for mom with the transportation and the one vehicle and just the gas. So yes, every resource changes if they move to Kentucky.
I have a question, but also a comment about this relevant conversation. But with them moving, I've never enrolled a child in preschool before, so I'm not really sure how easy it is to like start a preschool and then move and then start a new one. And it sounds like additionally, mom's concerns are like, I don't want to start something and then move and then have to start something else. with other services as well. I don't know if anybody, that's not exactly a question, but like, I feel like this is a concern of hers. Do we have recommendations or ways to talk to her about like, yes, we know you're moving, but also think it's good to start it anyway, like to address her concerns, but also provide the answer?
I think that's a really great point, Haley. I think one thing I'm thinking of is like a lot of our treatments are somewhat time limited. So like the hope would be that if they could get into a treatment before they moved, like it might also end before they move would be something I hope. Preschool is a little trickier. And I do think this is a kid who would really benefit from the structure of like a preschool classroom and kind of learning those rules. Head Start is not something that like financially is going to be putting, I think, this family at like a higher stressor than they're already experiencing. So my hope would be that maybe, and I don't know how Head Start works, if they could like transfer from one Head Start to another. No, they can't. Okay. So preschool might be a tougher sell, but I'm hoping some of the treatments might be possible. That's a great point.
I also think she's so incredibly friendly and she has a lot of ease, at least she demonstrated a lot of ease going from provider being evaluated by all different kind of providers. So I think that that should be in her favor if she makes the move to Kentucky. So it's not a definitive thing. So you almost would hate to hold up her progress in moving forward with next steps on the thought that that might be a reality in the fall.
She definitely is a very friendly little kid. So that's a great point as well. Any other like questions or concerns or just kind of general comments people are having about recommendations or what next steps look like for this family before we kind of think about how we want to structure next week and who should all be there?
Can I just ask a follow-up thought on that? Are you able to kind of map out next steps, thinking about what are the next steps, living where you currently are? What are the next steps if you move to Kentucky so that she already has in place, since she won't be followed by the division, those things that she would need to tap into if she moves to Kentucky and then everything changes?
I am much less knowledgeable about what we have in Kentucky. So maybe social work, we can talk about what next steps in Kentucky might look like in the fall if they do move there. And that might be like an ongoing process. So we definitely have a plan to map out what next steps are going to be if they're here. I think services are tougher to get connected to in Kentucky from what I've heard about Kentucky. But we can also think about that so that they don't feel like they're kind of hung out to dry if they do go to Kentucky.
I think that we can tell them like Head Start is Head Start. So Northern Kentucky Community Action Agency is Head Start. Butler County ESC is the Head Start where they are now. To start that intake process, I printed things about both of them off while we're sitting here. For mental health services, and if you were to move, I would just word it as if you were to move to Northern Kentucky, our suggestion is to contact North Key. Because they would cover like all 9 Northern Kentucky counties. So kind of that way, like no matter where you fall, if you're truly in Northern Kentucky, it's North Key's catchment area. So that she knows where, like that way she has like a number to call. So that she's got something. So I think that we give her both pieces of information so that she has them for both places. She is good at changing states, and she knew how to change the Medicaid, which is a like 5-step process. She knew already how to do it, was already in process before she came to us. So like she knew how to change her benefits state to state with that move from Ohio to Indiana, then Indiana back to Ohio. So she was really resourceful, and mom knew what to do and took all those action steps independently to get their benefits straightened out.
Looking back through the, our notes from January, it looks like there have been concerns around toilet training and inconsistency there, some challenges. Is that something that we feel like in her case, OT might be able to work on with her? Or I know ADHD Center is not going to, work on that. Or I don't know if she'd be one that we could provide any other toilet training resources. I don't know if she would qualify to come to our center for that. Steph.
Mom can always do the toilet training class. That doesn't,
Mhm.
yeah, you don't have to like verify a child's disability to attend the class, and it's only $25, but it's time consuming.
Mhm.
It's across
When,
2
during the
mornings.
IS, yeah, maybe during the ISS, maybe someone can ask if that's still a concern, and if it is, we could do something to kind of that'll certainly cut down on some family stress if we get that, some improvement there.
Yeah, we can definitely highlight that. We tend to like give them a list of all of our classes and kind of talk through which ones feel most important to you right now and then kind of highlight the ones. We also put in some like home strategies in there in case mom, maybe that $25 is too much or that time is too much, things she can try at home to try and encourage that toilet training too.
Maybe I've missed this, but I understand, these kids that come to us and we can't keep everyone in DDBP, but who do we recognize as somebody who can be like the quarterback for this child's care? She's not super complex, but she's not complex. So who is gonna really help this mom stay connected?
Honestly, it should be the medical home, the primary care home, to like be monitoring development and behavioral challenges. I mean, that would be what the American Academy of Pediatrics would say, that like the medical home should be kind of managing resources and referrals to subspecialists and behavioral supports, et cetera. Now, to the extent that that happens is highly variable from practice to practice.
A flyer in there, so I think I'm pretty broad in my reach, correct, Steph? I mean, I could, if someone reached out to me, whether they are truly connected. I mean, I do community support. I also think about her, she has a uniqueness that we've discussed about the child, the concerns that we had about behaviors that she was exhibiting or things she might be visually getting exposed to. So I'm not saying I'm the one for that at all, but I'm just saying it would be so comforting to know that someone was keeping there's a tether on that in case that developed into anything concerning.
Somebody said you had a new pediatrician. Who was the new pediatrician? What office is it?
The new pediatrician practice is Primary Health Solutions of Butler County. So they are, they do more. They are like a clinic-based provider. Usually they've got additional services. Sometimes they have embedded mental health services in some other locations, dental services.
Are they one that we took over or no?
So I cannot see her note. I can see like just the referral information and that it tells me there was a visit yesterday, but I cannot see her documentation. So I'm thinking no, because this is more like a Medicaid clinic. I'm pretty sure, Butler County Community Healthcare Consortium, I'm pretty sure they are a medical home.
You said it's Primary Care Solutions?
Primary Health Solutions.
Primary Health Solutions. Just looking it up.
In Hamilton.
Okay.
And mom also told them she was being evaluated for autism and was getting the results very soon. By us. And she failed their vision screen in the office, which is why she did the new ophthalmology referral.
They do have mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or concerns before we kind of move on to thinking about our meeting with them next week? I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay. So for our meeting next Tuesday, again, it's at 9 a.m. Lindsay and I will be there. I know, Elizabeth, you and I talked about the family discipline being there to observe. If that still works for you. I'm wondering if it would be good. I feel like I'm calling on you guys a lot today, but for social work to also be there. But I don't know if that works with your guys' schedule or with what you were thinking.
So Nicole, you had asked me if I would use that as your observation for FCC, which is great. I can do that with the recording. So I think the most recent, the other team, they opted for, I think, social work to be there. And I feel like Victoria has a nice, not that I can't be there, but Victoria has a nice connection with the mother. I didn't want it to be, too many irons in the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, sounds great.
I'm available to be there.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Does that feel like an okay team? Is there anyone else who would like to be there or who we feel like is important to be there? Or anything like that?
As a follow-up thought to that, I will say that I already added into Lindsay's binder the family support type of resources, and I was going to talk to Janetta and see if she had anything she'd like to add in.
Great. Thank you guys for doing that. Well, I think those were kind of the big domains that we needed to talk about today. I will kind of punt it to the faculty to see if there's anything else that feels like we need to go over or that we haven't addressed yet. And if not, great. But if so, we have some time.
Did you have other thoughts, Steph, on who should be monitoring this kid long term, like it's mostly behavioral, from a behavioral standpoint?
Yeah, I'm just trying to poke around on their website too. So I see that they have mental health services, and it seems to me like what I'm reading, and if I read through with my psychologist hat on, it seems like it's probably not a pediatric focused practice in terms of the mental health services. So I think, Nicole, I
They
don't know what,
usually do have at least somebody who sees kids.
okay, perfect. Because I
Typically,
think
they
that,
do have someone.
yeah, we maybe, and maybe Nicole, you and Lindsay had talked about this already, and Victoria had shared, and Marta had shared some other resources, but I just think maybe having like we said, like a game plan for go to Primary Health Solutions, talk to them about the need for behavioral health, whatever that looks like, right? Like we're not going to prescribe that you have to have PCIT. We're not going to prescribe that you have to have behavior therapy XYZ specifically, but then get you connected with somebody that is more of a mental health support to guide that. And then if that is not available at primary health, I think we need to have at least one or two backups in that community, as well as saying, hey, reach back out to us if and when that move to Kentucky comes, because we can still help out even if we can't see you in our medical clinic. I don't know. That's kind of how I would think we could and should go about it. I don't know. Happy to hear other perspectives though.
So that typically falls to us. Kicking, and in general, kicking patients out seems
Yeah.
right now to be falling to social work. We have limits of what we can do and how much time we can spend doing them. So I would say we should definitely give her the interactive map. So no matter where she lives in the tri-state area, here's options. There are lots of other people in Butler County, like in that Hamilton area. We've got, especially if she doesn't have DD and she's a verbal, we got people who can do the ADHD and little kids out there.
Yeah.
So we've got provider options, and they all take Medicaid. Some of them might even come to her home, because she'll have another baby too in the amount of time we're talking about with this possible move. There'd be a baby come. So I think
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insinuate that we needed to hang on to her. Just that she could maybe reach out to DWP Family Support if in the future they move to Kentucky and they're like, we need a check-in, you know? Does that make sense? No.
I got an alert and it cuts out.
No.
Sorry. But I have some things to add to the binder of resource information. That does include some where you're at Butler County and a little bit of like, here's Northern Kentucky. If you move there, like these are some things to think about providers too. I think we should tell her and make sure she knows things are different when you cross the river. But I understand housing, they feel like housing would be cheaper and it definitely would be closer to Hebron. So, yes.
Faculty, anything else that you all were hoping we would cover today or go over today that we haven't yet for our friend Mila?
I think you guys have done a really wonderful job, and you've done an exceptional job leading all of this, Nicole. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do any of our resident friends have any questions? Sorry, I missed the introductions, but feel free. We'd love to hear from you guys too.
This was super interesting for us to be a part of. Thanks so much. I don't know that any of us have questions though.
Yeah. No, I know I'm just pinch hitting for Lindsay today, but it seems like everybody has done a really nice job thinking through. And again, this is one of those situations where it might seem a little straightforward, but man, we've rolled out a lot to help this mom and help guide their future family, situation and next steps. So I think that there's a lot of things therapeutically that we can say, we are not seeing these things. And this is good news, to a certain degree. But this is what we still need to work on. So.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Stay safe in whatever this storm is going to be or not going to be. I think we're okay to sign off. Does that sound good? All right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. Good job, everybody.
Guys, take care.
Thank you.